Cow Dung Custard. A lot of kids have nicknames, like Mouse or Bluey or Freckles. Those sorts of nicknames are okay. Well, my nickname was the Cow Dung Kid. Can you imagine that? The Cow Dung Kid. What a name to get stuck with. It was all my father's fault, him and his vegetable garden. Oh, don't get me wrong, though. Dad was a good bloke, a real good bloke. He brought me up all on his own. I didn't have a mother, so he can take all the credit for the way I turned out. Dad loves to grow vegetables. His vegetable garden is his pride and joy. Every year he went into competition. He always won lots of prizes for the best vegetables. He won prizes for the biggest pumpkins and the juiciest tomatoes. He grew the biggest veggies in the whole town. He once grew a pumpkin that was so big it took 4 men to lift it. His peas were as big as golf balls, and his beans, they were as long as your arm. No kidding. The whole yard was filled up with vegetables. He had long rows of them. Every row, right, had a little sign at the end. On each sign was the name of the vegetable that was growing and the batch number. This batch number told which type of manure he used. Batch 24 meant 3 shovels of cow dung and 1 shovel of horse droppings. Batch 14 was 2 shovels of horse droppings, 1 shovel of sheep droppings and 3 shovels of pig droppings. Dad had every type of manure you could think of. He had duck and goose, he had kangaroo and wombat, he had bat and emu, he even had snake droppings. And guess who had to help him collect it? You're not wrong. It was me. Every weekend I had to go and collect cow dung. Every weekend without fail. Now we lived right in the middle of town. I had to get a wheelbarrow and walk out to the country. Then I had to fill it up with cow dung, and it had to be fresh. Nice and sloppy, Dad would say. Make sure it's nice and sloppy. Then I had to walk back through the town with a wheelbarrow full of sloppy cow dung. I wasn't on my own, though. Oh, no. I had company. About 5,000 flies came with me. They were like a black cloud following me along the street. Everyone could see me. It felt like the whole town was watching me and my flies. I got the nickname of the Cow Dung Kid on one of those trips. It was on Christmas Day. Dad's boss at work grew vegetables too, but they were never as good as Dad's. He didn't have a son to go and get manure. So Dad had a bright idea. He decided to give the boss a surprise, a Christmas present. He wanted me to go and get the manure for his boss. Now, just tip it out and leave it for him to find, said Dad. He'll be tickled pink. I might even get a raise out of this. Oh, but Dad, I pleaded, not on Christmas Day. Everyone will be looking. I can't do it. I just can't. He gave me one of his sorrowful looks. He shook his head and said, after all I've done for you, Greg, and you won't even help me out with one little thing. I gave in and went. I didn't want to spend all Christmas feeling guilty. I set off at the crack of dawn. I didn't even open my presents. I wanted to get it over and done with before people were out of bed. But it was no use. All the kids in town were up early. They followed me and my cow dung along the street. They were all on new bikes and scooters that they'd got for Christmas. They thought it was a great joke. Oh, look what Santa brought Craig, shouted some bright spark. Everyone laughed. As I went along, more and more kids started following me. After a while, it was about 50 of them. Someone yelled out, "King of the Flies! Greg is King of the Flies!" "The Cow Dung Kid," said another voice. Another laugh went up. They all started yelling it out. "Cow Dung Kid! Cow Dung Kid!" Oh, it was embarrassing, I can tell you that. So I ran faster and faster. Some of the cow dung fell out, but I didn't care. I just kept running. At last, I reached the boss's house. I tipped out the cow dung on his doorstep, right against the door. That way, he'd get a surprise when he opened the door, and Dad would get all the glory. Anyway, that's how I got the name the Cow Dung Kid. And after all of that, Dad's boss wasn't even grateful. He said something about cow dung all over his carpet. There's just no understanding some people. He didn't even say thanks. Flies, flies and flies. They hung around our house all day and all night. It was the smell of the manure. The smell attracted them. There were flies everywhere. They came down the chimney and under the doors. People had no trouble finding our house. If anyone asked where we lived, they were always told the same thing. Just stop at the house with the flies. The neighbours didn't like the flies. They were always going crook. So Dad gave them vegetables to keep them quiet. He gave them giant carrots and potatoes. They liked them so much that they only complained about the really bad days. This usually happened when Dad made a very smelly batch, like batch 72. Dad kept each batch of manure in a large rubbish bin. He had at least 200 of them in the backyard. The worse they smelled, the more flies hung around them. The ones with a really bad smell were kept down near the back fence, away from the house. Mr. Farley lived in the house at the back. He didn't like us much. He never spoke to us. He was a pretty crabby bloke. I could never figure out why. The trouble all started with batch 72. It was the strongest batch that Dad had ever made. It had bat droppings, rabbit droppings, and wombat droppings. There was also a bit of lizard and potteroo. But the main ingredient was cow dung. Dad also threw in some rotten pumpkins. They were bright yellow. He added water and he stirred the mix up, and it all went smooth and yellow. It's like custard, I said. Cow dung custard. It was a smelly batch, very smelly. It was the worst one that Dad had made. Good, said Dad. The more it smells, the better it works. I'll grow some great potatoes with this batch. He took out a pen and wrote cow dung custard on the side of the bin. The flies were already starting to gather, so I decided to go inside and get out of the way. Oh, the smell was bad, and it was getting worse. I could smell batch 72 as I went to bed. Even though it was at the bottom of the yard, I knew there was going to be trouble with the neighbours over this. Batch 72 looked like custard, but it sure didn't smell like it. The next morning I woke early. I knew that something was wrong. I could hardly breathe and I felt sick. It was the smell of the cow dung custard. It was the most terrible smell I'd ever come across. It was so bad you could almost see it. Every breath was painful. I put a handkerchief over my mouth and rushed to the window. All of the neighbours were up. They were outside our house. Nobody could sleep. They were all dressed in their pyjamas and they were all holding handkerchiefs over their noses. Some of them were making groaning noises. They were trying to shout. Some people were waving their fists at the house and they were all mad at us. I went and woke Dad up. He has a poor sense of smell. He was the only person in the street who was still asleep. He looked out the window. Amazing, he said. Amazing. Look at that. There's not one fly to be seen. He didn't even notice the people. He was looking for flies. I couldn't believe it. But what he said was true. There were no flies hanging around. They were all dead. The ground was covered in dead flies. They were like black carpet all over the lawn. The smell was so bad that it had killed all of the flies. Oh, you'd better do something, I told him. That stuff might be dangerous and everyone's mad at us. The neighbours are all angry. He looked out of the window. Everyone was running away. The smell was so awful they couldn't stand it. You're right, said Dad. You stay here. I'll go and see what I can do. So he walked down to the bottom of the yard. I could hear the bodies of dead flies crunching under his feet. I was glad he told me to stay inside. I think I would have fainted if I'd gone any closer to that smell. It was lucky for Dad that he couldn't smell very well. Now I watched him out of the window. He drove our old truck into the backyard. He tried to lift the cow dung custard onto it, but it was too heavy. He had to tip it out into a lot of buckets, and then he lifted them up onto the truck, and after he'd put all the buckets onto the truck, he came back to the house. He had yellow stuff all over his dressing gown. Oh, don't come in, I shouted. Please, don't come in. He yelled at me through the window. I'm going down to the sea with it. I can't think of anywhere else to put it, so you stay here, Greg. He needn't have worried. There was no way I was going anywhere near that cow dung custard. Then I noticed something terrible. Dad's hair had fallen out. He was completely bald. He did not have one hair left on his head. Even his eyebrows had fallen out. That cow dung custard was strong, too strong. Dad jumped into the truck and he drove out the front gate. I watched him drive down the road. There wasn't a person in sight. They were all inside with their heads under their pillows. As he went by, the dogs in the street ran off, yelping with their tails between their legs. Dad tipped the cow dung custard over a cliff and into the sea. For the next 2 weeks, there were dead fish floating around everywhere. The town we lived in is called Lake's Entrance. It's a fishing town. All the fishermen were cross with Dad for killing the fish. People in the street were mad at him too. The smell hung around for weeks. Dad took a lot of vegetables around to them, trying to make it up. Mr. Jackson, he lived next door. He told Dad to go away. "I don't want your vegetables," he said, "and I don't want your manure or your smells. Why don't you go and live on a farm? Then you can be as smelly as you want." Well, he had a point. I was getting sick of it too. The kids at school called me the cow dung kid. Everyone knew us and where we lived. All the houses in the street had for sale notices in the front yard. No one wanted to live near us. I didn't blame them. "Listen, Dad," I said, "let's go and live somewhere else, on a farm. Then I won't have to go and get manure and you'll have all you want. And there won't be any neighbours to complain." Well, Dad looked sad. He nodded, his bald head. "I'd like to move to a farm, Greg, but, well, we can't afford it. Farms cost a lot of money and we are broke. We'll have to stay here. But I will do one thing for you. I'll get rid of the smell. I'll find a way to stop the manure smelling. It'll be called Batch 100. Batch 100 will have no smell. And that's the only one I will use." I went off shaking my head. Poor old Dad. He meant well, but I knew he couldn't do it. How could anyone make up a batch of manure that didn't smell? Dad tried everything he could think of to make Batch 100. He put in flowers, he put in soap, he put in perfume. But he just couldn't stop the manure smelling. Our house was as smelly as ever. Even the school bus wouldn't come down our street anymore. One good thing did happen. Dad's hair started growing back. It was as thick and black as it had always been. Then one day, he did it. He made Batch 100. You couldn't smell a thing. It wasn't like the cow dung custard. You didn't even know it was there. I was rapt. I thought our problems were over. But I was wrong. Batch 100 had other problems. It was the worst one ever. People couldn't smell Batch 100, but the flies could. Flies can smell better than people can. It's something like a dog whistle. Dogs can hear them and people can't. Well, flies could smell Batch 100 when people couldn't. The flies came in their thousands, in their millions. The air was thick with them. The sound of their buzzing was terrible to hear. They crawled all over your face, into your nose and your ears. They were so thick, you couldn't see the sun after a while. It started to grow dark, and it was only lunchtime. Dad and I were in the backyard. After a while, we couldn't see the house or the back fence. The flies were just too thick. I'd never seen anything like it before. There were so many flies in the air that I couldn't find Dad. "Greg," he shouted, "go back to the house, quickly, this is dangerous." I couldn't see where he was. I couldn't see where anything was. I looked down at the ground. There were so many flies in the air, I couldn't see my feet. I had to squint to stop them getting into my eyes. I started to walk slowly where I thought the house was. I bumped into something large. It was the truck. Well, I could tell what it was by the feel of it. I was going the wrong way. I turned round and tried a different direction. Then I heard Dad's voice. I could just make it out over the buzzing of the flies. "Greg, this way," he called. I followed the sound of his voice. I walked very slowly to make sure I didn't bump into anything, and at last I reached Dad. I couldn't see him, but I could feel him. He was standing on the doorstep. "Get ready," he shouted. "I'm going to open the door, and when I say go, rush in as quickly as you can, and I'll slam the door after us." "Go," he yelled. We both fell into the room. I couldn't see anything, but I heard the door shut with a bang. "Put the light on," said Dad. I switched on the light, and the room was full of flies, but it wasn't as bad as outside. At least we could see. I looked at the window, and it was black. Millions of flies were crawling all over it. "Quick," said Dad. "Block up all the cracks under the doors, and I'll cover the chimney. We've got to stop them coming in." So I started stuffing towels and rags under the door. Dad covered up the fireplace with a piece of cardboard, and when we had all the cracks blocked up, he found some fly spray. We had plenty of fly spray in the house. It was something we used a lot of. It took 3 cans to kill them all. We ran upstairs to look out the top windows. They were all black too. We couldn't see outside at all. We were trapped in our own house by millions and millions of flies. Dad was upset. "Oh, this is bad, Greg," he said. "Very bad. Batch 100 is much too strong. Every fly in the country must be here, and it's all my fault. We've got to get rid of those flies." Just then, the phone rang. Dad picked it up. It was Mr. Jackson. He was shouting. I could hear every word, even though the flies were making such a loud noise outside. "You've done it this time, Moffat," he yelled. "The whole town is blacked out with flies. Nobody can get out of their house. It's pitch black in the middle of the day. And it's all your fault and your manure. You better do something, and quick. You brought the flies here. Now get rid of them." The phone went dead. He had hung up. "What can we do?" said Dad. "How can we get rid of them?" He hung his head in his hands. Oh, the poor bloke. I really felt sorry for him. We both sat there, thinking. Outside, the flies were getting thicker and thicker. "Fly spray," I said. "No good," he told me. "There isn't enough fly spray in the world to kill this lot. We need something stronger, something really powerful." We sat there, looking at each other, and we both thought of the answer at the same time. "Cow dung custard," we shouted together. "That's it," said Dad. "The smell is so strong that it kills flies. I'll mix up a special batch." "But what about the smell, Dad?" I asked. "We can't help the smell. This is an emergency. The whole town is blacked out with flies. We have to do something." "But how can we make it?" I asked him. "Well, you can't see a thing out there. You can hardly breathe. The flies get into your nose and your mouth. You won't be able to make the cow dung custard. It's as black as pitch." We both fell silent again. We just sat and looked at each other. Then Dad had an idea. "The beekeeper's outfit," he yelled. "I can wear the beekeeper's outfit." Once Dad used to keep bees. He still had the outfit for smoking out the bees. He had a hat and a net to stop the bees from stinging him. "Well, what about me? You can't do it on your own." "You'll have to make a heck of a lot. I'll have to come too." "Your wetsuit. You can wear your wetsuit. And put on the goggles. You can wear the snorkel to stop the flies getting into your mouth." We dressed up in our outfits. Dad had his hat and his bee net. I had my wetsuit, goggles and a snorkel. I felt silly, but as Dad said, this was an emergency. We tied a rope to each other so that we didn't become lost. Then we walked to the door and opened it. 1,000,000 flies poured into the room. Everything went black. The light was on, but we couldn't even see it. I felt a pull on the rope. Dad was moving out into the backyard. I couldn't see him, so I just followed the rope, and the flies swirled around us in one huge black cloud. Now we walked slowly. We didn't want to fall over, and at last we reached the back fence. Now I felt Dad's hand on my arm. He was shouting at me, but it was difficult to hear him because of the loud buzzing of the flies. "Help me tip the batch 100 over," he yelled. "Then we'll empty another 15 bins. We'll need at least 16 bins of cow dung custard to kill all these flies. They must be covering the whole town." Now we struggled over to batch 100. The flies were all trying to get to it. They were so thick that it was like walking through a river. I plunged my arm through the sea of flies and pushed over the bin. 1,000,000,000 flies rose into the air as it tipped over. The buzz was so loud it hurt my ears, and the wind from their wings, it blew me over. We stood up and felt our way to the other bins. It took a long time to push them all over and empty out the manure. In the end, we had 16 empty bins. I felt Dad's hand on my arm. "All right, we'll have to untie the rope," he shouted. "It'll take a long time to mix up 16 bins of cow dung custard. We have to hurry. The flies are getting thicker. Now every fly in Australia will be here soon." "Oh, I'm scared, Dad," I told him. "Well, I might get lost if you untie the rope." "Just feel your way along the fence," he said. "When you get to the manure heap, try to fill up the wheelbarrow with the cow dung. Put 10 shovels full into each bin, and I'll put the rest of the mixture in." His voice was shaking. I knew he was scared too, so I undid the rope and followed the fence to the manure heap. It took a long time, but at least I managed to put the cow dung in every bin. The flies kept bumping into my goggles. It felt as if someone was throwing rice at me. Every now and then I bumped into Dad. He was tipping all sorts of things into the bins. Once he dropped a rotten pumpkin onto my foot. Then something wonderful happened. A shocking stink filled the air. It was the first batch of cow dung custard. Hooray! I shouted. I was really happy, even though the smell was so bad. I didn't know whether it was working. I couldn't tell if it was killing the flies or not. There seemed to be just as many as ever. Dad came over to me. "Go back to the house," he yelled. "If this works, there are going to be dead flies everywhere. You might get buried if you stay here." "No way," I told him. "I'm staying with you." After a while, we had 2 bins of cow dung custard mixed up. Oh, the stink grew stronger and stronger. I felt ill, but I had to keep going. We made 1 bit at a time. Now, by the time we had made 10 bins, the smell was so strong we had to stop. "We can't go on," said Dad. "I'm going to faint if I don't get away from this smell." "Hey," I suddenly shouted, "I can see you." I could just make out the shape of Dad and his bee net. Oh, there were not so many flies in the air. The cow dung custard was working. It was killing some of the flies. I looked at the ground. It was covered in flies. Some of them were dead, but some of them were lying on their backs, kicking their legs in the air. There was a thick carpet of flies all over the lawn. Then I felt my head. My hair was full of dead flies. Oh, they were starting to fall down out of the sky. It was raining flies. "Quick," said Dad, "back to the house. We'll be buried alive if we don't hurry." So we ran back to the house. Flies were pouring down all around us. The dead bodies were so deep that we couldn't move properly. They came up to my ankles, and then up to my knees. Dad reached the door first. He pushed it open and just fell inside. "Help!" I screamed. "I'm stuck." The flies were up to my armpits, and they were still falling. I was scared out of my wits. I didn't want to drown in a sea of flies. I couldn't move backwards or forwards. Dad still had the rope tied around his waist. He started to undo it. "Oh, quick, I'm going under," I yelled. The flies were getting deeper and deeper. They were nearly up to my mouth. He threw the rope over and I grabbed the end of it. But it was too late. The dead flies were right over my head. I was buried under the bodies of the flies. It was lucky that I had the goggles and snorkel on. The snorkel poked above the pile of flies. It enabled me to breathe, but I couldn't see a thing. Everything was black. And then I felt strong hands pulling me up. It was Dad. He'd followed the rope. He'd dug down to me. He dragged me across the top of the flies and into the house. Then he slammed the door. Oh, it was much better in the house. The flies were only knee-deep. At least we could walk around. So we went upstairs quickly as we could and we looked out of the window. It was still raining flies, but it was starting to ease off. At last, it stopped. Every fly was dead. The cow dung custard had killed the lot. Oh, the smell of it was terrible. Our place was on the top of a hill, and we could see the whole town. Every house was covered in dead flies. They covered the roads and the cars, the trees and the gardens. It looked just like a snow-covered village, but with black snow. There wasn't a person in sight. Everyone was trapped in their houses. The whole town was silent. And over it all hung the terrible smell of cow dung custard. Dad looked at me. "Good grief, Greg," he said. "All of your hair is gone." I felt the top of my head. It was smooth. I was as bald as a badger. Oh, I rushed to the mirror. "Oh, no," I groaned. "Not that. Oh, not bald." Then I looked at Dad. He was bald again too. All of his new hair had fallen out. "It's the cow dung custard," I said. "It's so strong that it makes your hair fall out." I looked out of the window again. It was still very quiet, but 4 or 5 people were out. They were trying to clear the flies away from their front doors. It was hard work. They were up to their armpits in flies. And I looked at them more closely. There was something strange about them, but I couldn't work out what it was. Then I got a shock. They were all bald. Oh, I knew there was going to be big trouble over this. A bit later, we heard the sound of a motor. It sounded like a tractor, but it wasn't. It was a bulldozer. It was clearing the streets. It pushed the flies to the side of the road, huge banks. Behind the bulldozer was a police car. They came slowly up our street. People were following them, lots of bald people, men, women, children. Oh, they were angry. They were mad. They were yelling and screaming at us. The bulldozer stopped at our house, turned around and came through our garden. It cleared a path up to the front door, and then it stopped. A bald policeman stepped down from it. He had a handkerchief tied around his nose to stop the smell. He came into the house without knocking. "Quick," he said, "get into the police car. I'll have to get you out of here before the mob gets you. I don't know what they'll do to you if they get their hands on you. They might tear you to pieces." Oh, he was worried, very worried. So was I. He pushed us into the car and started driving down the street. Crowds of bald people surrounded the car. They threw things at the car and tried to open the doors. They wanted to pull us out. Some even threw handfuls of flies at the car. I could see why they were mad. Everyone was bald, even the cats and the dogs. Not one person in the town had hair left anymore on their body. In the end, the police got us safely through the town. They took us to Melbourne, which was a long way away. Then they let us go. Well, Dad and I were both upset. We knew one thing for sure. We'd never go back to Lake's entrance again. There was a big fuss about the whole thing. It was in all the papers and on the TV. Dad and I changed our names so that nobody could find us. Then it all died down and people started to forget about it. There was a shortage of wigs in Australia for a while, but after a couple of months, everybody's hair grew back. As time passed, people started to think that, it was funny. Now I'm writing this next to the swimming pool on our farm. Dad's out the front cleaning our Rolls Royce. Things worked out quite well for us in the end. Dad made a lot of money out of an invention. It's yellow stuff for getting rid of hair. People buy it in tubes and they put it on their legs. It works really well and it smells lovely. It's called CDC Hair Remover. Everybody likes it. Well, they think it's wonderful. But nobody knows what the CDC stands for.